Hello, I'm Michael Murphy. Yeah. Don't know how to take that. I'm just a Radiators fan. I tried to emigrate in 1983, and like a lot of people who failed to be proper emigrants, I came back. But while I was in England, I went to see a band called the Pogues, who were playing with the Shillelagh sisters. And, you know, it was kind of cool. And I think Roger and Ted were there, and Elvis Costello was there. So, you know, you're taking in, when you go to a gig, you're not just looking at the band, you're looking at everything else that's going on around you. And I was chatting to one of the Shillelagh sisters, who was very nice, and then went on to be in Bananarama. And then I noticed that Phil Chevron was there. And suddenly I thought, that's the coolest thing about this entire room. So I just went over to stand near him, like not to talk to him or anything, but just I thought, he's cool, so if I stand near him, I'll be kind of cool. And that's the entire story. But Philip Chevron's music, and the music made by his bandmates in both of the bands, affected me very, very deeply. And I think it's very important that we don't forget that punk rock came about from an open mind. I'm very, very reminded of something that Roger Armstrong said in December 1977 in an interview with Hot Press, where he was, you know, detailing the fact that punk rock had to be anti-fascist, it had to be inclusive, it had to be principled. And someone who I want to acknowledge who's not here is Niall McGurk from the Hope Collective, whose mother is seriously ill at the moment. But when the gig in the SFX with Fugazi, the Act Up, the AIDS benefit gig took place, it was Niall who organised that. But that was absolutely part of the stream that flowed from punk rock, Tom Robinson and the Radiators from Space in particular in the Irish context. So I'm here, I'm a fan, but this won't be a very, very long Q&A, because I want to invite people in the audience who've probably got better questions or things that are on their minds. But I thought we'd actually do this backwards, because it's punk rock. And Declan, you know a part of Philip's work, a part of his love for music that a load of punk rockers or new wavers or Irish trad mavericks don't know about. Like, where did you first come across Philip?
Well, I was just saying to a couple of friends of mine there that it was actually in Tramore in 1980, I think. There was a Battle of the Bands competition that went on for a week. And I was sent down by Hot Press, and he was sent down by Mulligan Records as judges. And we just spent the week in kind of drinking, really. I think I could have given a more elaborate description of what we did. We went to the races as well, because it was race week in Tramore, you know. And we just got on extremely well and had a great time. And so that's how I got to know Phil. And I would obviously have met him over the years in different contexts. But the one we're talking about here is the musical. It's sometime, I think, in 1996, Phil contacted me and we met up, and he said he had this idea for a boxing musical, which is great. And I think it had come about from, as he told it, he was in a restaurant in New York. It must have been around the time of Fairy Tale of New York, because Matt Dillon was the person he was talking to, and he loved Matt and had a great night with Matt, but he was describing his idea for this boxing musical, and Matt Dillon did an impromptu version of you know, the Guys and Dolls song, I Got the Horse Right Here, his name is Paul Revere, all this, right? So at that point, Phil decided Matt Dillon has to be the main character in this musical, which was basically an Irish-American kind of boxing musical, right? There's an easy sell now, isn't it? You know? I thought it was just insane. I mean, it was a mad thing, right? And he did as well. But he understood probably better than I did at the time that all forms of musical theatre are innately insane. I mean, I think there's a line in Seinfeld about musicals. Who sings? You know, now, you know, you have to kind of get beyond that. But it is just this amazing genre. But Phil was, I mean, Deborah described it so well earlier. Phil was absolutely devoted to musical theatre, more than anything else, I think, and more than rock and roll, possibly, if you can imagine that, right? It was his thing. I mean, he knew everything about it, and he knew things about it that the people who did it didn't, and that's just true, you know. He would do up all these compilations for people, which were, you know, people like Gwen Verdon and stuff, you know, these Broadway people that a lot of people have never heard of, but who are legends. Like I was finding out all these people I never knew about. Like I didn't know that John Raitt, who sang in the original Broadway production of Oklahoma, is Bonnie Raitt's father, right? I didn't know that. A lot of people still don't know that. So he was just this absolute fountain of knowledge. I remember Deborah as well, in his house in Nottingham. I'd forgotten about the Drapes, the theatre, you know, that they were the, that was his home, was kind of a shrine to musical theatre. And so it was a very serious thing. I mean, he was really into it, and also accepted that musicals, to embark on trying to write a musical is innately insane. It's crazy, because if you look at some of the best known musicals, or things like, say, Jesus Christ Superstar, a singing, dancing spectacular about the crucifixion of Christ, right? Evita, a singing, dancing spectacular about a Latin American dictator. Sure, we go with that, you know. So there's this innate sort of unreasonableness about them, right? But the only thing he was talking to me about it, right, was that Phil wasn't really into sport. He got into sport quite later than most people. When he did, he became completely obsessed with it. I mean, Nottingham, he literally moved to Nottingham because he became a fan of Nottingham Forest. So he's always all in with everything, right? But I had a column that I wrote in the Hot Press about sport, and he kind of liked that column. He kind of thought the way I wrote about sport was kind of interesting, and he thought that I could maybe bring some of that to this boxing musical, right? That I might know about the world of sport in a way that might be helpful. And so we embarked on this epic journey, which well, it's kind of a version of it. Like what remains of it are some wonderful songs and great performances of the demos, or the kind of the recordings that were done by people like Ronnie Drew and Kirsty MacColl. There's a duet with Kirsty MacColl and Ronnie Drew. There's there's Philip himself doing some really good stuff. And I mean, I could try to chart the actual journey of the musical, but we only have a day here. So suffice this to say that we were really excited about it at the start, and a lot of people were, except you realised the impossibility of actually getting a musical to happen is quite extraordinary. And I guess to some extent we'd given ourselves maybe too much to do, because you know, jukebox musicals were starting to be the thing at the time, whereby, you know, you just basically, the line I always felt was like, you know, people who are too old to rock and roll, too young to die, but who can go along to see their favourite band's records in a congenial setting, you know, like Queen or whatever, right? And so that was happening at the time. And, you know, we looked on that on Paul Simon had done a musical with, around that time, with Derek Walcott, the Nobel Prize winning poet. And it was wonderful, and it died after about 5 days. So the challenge we'd set ourselves in a way was enormous, and yet some wonderful stuff of it remains. Like the thread ultimately that Phil was trying to follow was the fact that George M. Cohan, there's a reference in one of his lyrics, George M. Cohan, the man who owned Broadway, there's a statue of him on Broadway, is of Irish extraction, right? His name is, his family's name is Keohane, Keohane. Again, Philip was probably the only person who knew that at the time, and even still, a lot of people don't know that because I think being Broadway, they think Keohane is Jewish, obviously, and it's an understandable thing to think, but he's actually of Irish lineage, right? So this giant of the more or less person that kind of invented musical theatre in America is actually of Irish extraction, close Irish extraction, but like, you know, one generation, like, and that really drove Phil to kind of, you know, he felt that nobody knew this, and they should know it, and that he would try to, I suppose, invent or recreate what would have been that sound, or what if Keohane had continued. What sort of a musical would he make about a boxer? You know, and that's as much as I can tell you at the moment. But we've absorbed that much anyway for now.
Now, it's crazy. I didn't know most of that before. But, you know, when people this morning were talking about, you know, how bleak, how oppressive, how church-ridden Ireland was for so long, I think it's very important to also acknowledge that people were listening to records. They were listening to the sounds of Broadway, to the incredible compositions about a life that seemed really far away. And to me, that's why Philip is such an important cultural figure, is because he understood both of those worlds. He understood the lived-in oppressive Ireland, but he also understood and felt this fantastic world that was the stage world. But just want to get this right in my head. You don't seem to me like a guy who writes musicals, and you think it's a mad idea.
Philip, he did as well. I mean,
Philip thinks it's a mad idea, and he really understands them. Yeah. So, like, what was the process? What was it like working with him? Like, is it pre-email? It's the 90s.
Yes, it is. I was writing a bit about it recently, and in the course of writing it, I just remembered we didn't actually have email when we started. This is so long ago as well. It's one that time plays tricks with you, you know, that you keep thinking, oh, that was maybe, I don't know, 15 years ago. 1996 was nearly 30 years ago, right? So it's kind of, you know, very hard to kind of get your head around in that sense. But I would go over to Nottingham, as simple as that. I would go over the East Midlands Airport, became a very familiar venue for me. And I would just go weekends usually, and we would just try to work it out. Do you know what I mean? We write character. Quite quickly at the start, we thought of characters, scenarios, stories, you know, whatever you need to make a musical. And from that, then the songs would develop. The characters and the songs with the atmosphere of the thing, that we wanted it to not be a kind of a modern musical. Do you know what I mean? With electric guitars. I don't know why we did that. We just did it, right? It was again quite foolish, probably, not to do that. But we just thought, no, it should be like, if we were trying to trace something like George M. Keohane, you can't really have electric guitars in it and power ballads, right? So. No, it should be more like a traditionally sounding musical, you know, that sort of feel. Yeah. And Phil knew all that, so it wasn't really a great stretch for him to do that. He loved all that stuff. So, you know, we worked. That's how we were. We worked in his house in Nottingham, and I would obviously go home and write some more, and then we'd go back again and do it. But early on, like we nearly. We nearly had this enormous success. Well, Cameron Mackintosh heard it, right? Someone got it to Cameron Mackintosh, and reportedly he was very impressed by it, except that he didn't really like the idea of a boxing musical.
Apart from that,
which was a problem, obviously. So you know, we got people who heard the stuff loved it. I mean, everyone that Philip knew was thrilled that he was doing this and knew how much he was into musical theatre and everything. So there was a great vibe about it, certainly, you know, for a long time. And you know, we look back later and we thought, like, we should have done certain things at certain times and didn't, or did other things, you know. But ultimately, I mean, I was saying to Stephen there just before this that you never know a process is about. Do you know what I mean? What will emerge, hopefully, is that Deborah and Pete are organising to actually put out the music in some form, I think in the CD or presentation of some kind.
Cylinder.
Sorry?
Rihanna cylinder.
Yeah. And, so maybe the whole thing was about getting that. I don't know, it's like, you accidentally discover LSD or something. It may be something that you never, you have an idea when you start writing a musical that, ideally what happens is somebody gives you 100 million quid and it ends up on Broadway. But that is so unlikely and so almost impossible that maybe whatever happens in the end is the right thing, and that's what happens. But there's some wonderful work in it, and see, people will hear that, even on the tribute night to Phil at the Olympia, Paul Brady sang "Suddenly," which was the first song that Phil wrote for the musical, and it was great. It just stood on its own. It just as a song, but we hope people will hear the rest of the stuff, and or at least we'll make a selection of stuff from it.
Here's hoping, because again, it's like what other punk rocker would have attempted a project like that? Like it shows this background that he was bringing to punk rock or whatever it was called at that time. Now, you mentioned process. You have this unique experience of working with Phil Chevron on a musical about a boxer.
Yeah.
Like, what was the process like? Was he a dictator? Was he a collaborator? Was he kind of navigating you through the world of musical theatre because he was the expert?
He did that all the time anyway. He was almost navigating everyone he knew through it. Do you know what I mean? Now, I particularly, you give me these compilations, which are perfectly typed up and annotated, and but I mean, most people who know Phil would have received all sorts of Broadway material and musical theatre material. But one of the main things was we were like friends. So like it was there was a lot of laughs. It was fun. Do you know what I mean? And we felt we were making progress. We knew, we were literally, recordings were being made. We knew we were getting a good reaction mostly from people, and I guess just not enough to actually put a musical on, because it's very difficult. It's extraordinarily difficult, and he knew that, but we just kept going, because what do you do? Do you know what I mean? Like we rethought it. We kind of chopped and changed. We said, well, look, nobody will give us 100 million quid to put that on. Maybe they'll give us whatever. But we did believe that there was something really good there. I mean, just the sound. There was a sound that Phil, I think, had discovered in this stuff that we knew was good. It was kind of original, even though it was in a kind of an old form. Some of it was wonderful. I mean, I knew just listening to the songs, that's really good. Like that, the material was really strong, and that kept us going. We knew that the thing had heart. That there was some really kind of substantial thing in there. And that would have kept us going. Now, even the work with Kirsty MacColl and Ronnie Drew, that was later on. So it still was developing, and any changes we were making were kind of working in that sense. Do you know what I mean? Like it wasn't getting worse. Do you know what I mean? And so they were like the latter recordings that were done, and people will hear them. They're really, really, really good and fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Just as a historical thing.
Great.
Suddenly, after all this time, look at me. After all this time, seeking words that are distant now as a nursery rhyme. Who is she? Who can can bring this change to a world she would rearrange. Suddenly, so familiar now and so strange. Although I'm not the kind of guy who'll ever pick up prizes for romance, now all at once I can't rely on my old nonchalance. Suddenly, I've been here before.
It's sort of an accident more than anything else. Most things in life, people don't plan things, I believe. And people tell you afterwards how they had a great scheme to do this and take the world over. No, you stumble through it. And when somebody said, like, what was your ambition in the early days of Chiswick Records? I said, it was to wake up the next morning solvent. That's kind of the sort of reality of it. And along the way, what you bring into that is what you actually like about music and what you understand. We eventually got out of pop music in the early 80s because it became about men with strange trousers and funny haircuts playing ironing boards and nothing to do with rock and roll. So we kind of moved on at that point, you know. So yeah, and you bring your passion to it. And, there's no point in doing it, frankly, because it's not an easy business. You know, with the pleasure you get out of it is the passion you put into it, if you like. And Ted and I and Trevor, the third partner, who's sort of on the business end, who's also a big music fan, and with narrower taste, I'd say, in music, but very deep. But Ted and I had a tremendous sort of broad taste. You know, we take anything on board and sort of chew it up and see if we liked it, if you like. You know, and we were also terribly inspired by the American entrepreneurs of the 50s and 60s, the post-war period. You know, the Baharis, Modern, and the Chess Brothers, and you know, the Erdoğans and Atlantic, etc. And what they did was sort of go on their doorstep, see what the music was, and record it. And that's precisely what we did. You know, literally down the road from where we were, found a group became known as the Count Bishops, took them into Pathway Studios, and for princely sum of £120, made an EP, which sold very well. We always had the concept, which was Ted's, of recording people who were doing music which was of an old, relating to an older style, at the same time as putting the original old music out, which is where Is then evolved out of Chiswick, because we dropped the first part because, as I say, music had moved on, and finding people playing music of an older style became more and more difficult. So yeah, we started the label based on that, literally from the doorstep, and then Eamon Carr, who I'd known, I lived in Dublin in the early 70s and worked with Horse Lips for a while, and Eamon sent me the demo and said we would be interested. Steve reminded me of the story where he'd sent a rough of the artwork over, and of the Radiators logo, etc. And I think it was Ted probably came back and said, "We love the artwork, but the band need to be better." So I came over from London, and we went into the Stephen Andrews studio. We did the first one. I can't remember.
The Trend.
Trend, it was Trend. Yeah. That's right. Which I remember was amazing because it was very difficult to hear what was coming through the monitors, because the walls were so thin that the band were playing loud, and so even when you had all the amps switched off, you could still hear the band. So I said, you know, I got production credit on that, but it sort of happened in front of me more than me producing it, to be honest. You know, the band were absolutely totally up for it. It was such a spectacularly good piece, and you know, it was just a red hot thing altogether. So that's sort of where we came in with the Radiators, and I mean, it was one of the first 10 punk rock singles. So it was in quite early, April '77. It was raking from about that time, and just the Clash's first single only came out in March, so you know, it was very early days. So it didn't quite have the commercial clout or whatever, you know, it was an outsider music. And then we sort of evolved through that, made the album, and you know, we didn't get big hits out of it, but it was strong enough commercially and of course critically for us to continue doing it, and then sort of found ourselves doing an album produced by Tony Visconti, which was quite remarkable. And I think when you look at it, we were talking earlier about the sort of punk rock thing with Philip. Punk was just one of the things Philip did. You know, you have the musical theatre aspect of things, one end. And then, you know, Ghost Town wasn't a punk record. It brought a lot of stuff to the party, if you like. Yeah. It was a very kind of deep, complex record. Yeah. So, you know, it was really just a musical evolution of the band. And Philip's writing, etc., and Pete's as well. And there was always, you know, the Radiators always a bit of a pop thing going for them. You know, I mean, you know, some of the punk rock bands, they could do 3 chords and noise, and that was about the height of it. But, you know, the Radiators were really way more musically sophisticated than that.
Philip had the Julie Andrews influence.
Yes.
Yeah. but
so, yeah, and just to finish that little, so, because even though we'd sort of given up on pop, by '89, we were reissuing Ghost Town, and Philip said, there's 2 songs that should have been on it in the first place, Plurabella and, of course, Cleary's. And so we said, right, in the studio, let's record them and add them to the album. And Cleary's was just so beautiful. I mean, it's just a gorgeous song. And it has that thing that I call pop facade. In other words, you could be walking past it in the street and it grabs your ear, but you don't know what it's about, you don't get the content, you know, but it's, oh, that's good, you know. So we even though we'd been out of that end of the business, we took on a plugger, went down to the dread Radio 1, where you lived or died in those days, and he took it as a producer to try and get it up to what they called the playlist. And the guy said, oh yeah, I like this, it's good, yeah, come back and we'll start out next week. So the guy, our plugger, came back, great news, you know, they really like it, you know, I think we've got something here. And he went back next week, and the producer said, oh, we can't play that, it's about 2 blokes. That's what we were up against, you know.
yeah,
You know, even though his initial ear, without going into it, had gone, oh, this is great, we could play this, then that's
I run a tight ship. That's 60 minutes on the nose. But Joe, could we invite a couple of questions from the audience? Do we have time?
Yeah, we're okay for time with you.
Okay.
And I know
We do a couple. If anyone has a couple,
Yeah.
if not,
Does anyone have it? Like, you'll never have these three people.
He has chosen a couple of short
Yeah.
songs from the very early days
Yeah.
that people have never heard before. So
Fantastic. So you all win.
encouraging.
Yeah. So any quick questions? Does anyone? Yeah. Cleaner.
I'm just hoping that there's a good answer to this, but I'm hoping
I'll make
like
one up
Philip
if there
found
isn't.
love in his life, that he found somebody or some.
Sorry, say that again.
I'm hoping Philip had, found good love in his life.
Well, I'll tell you a big story. I hope Deborah doesn't mind me telling this. I went over to Philip in Nottingham. I got to school. He said, "Come on over and sort of spend the weekend." And we hadn't seen each other maybe 4 or 5 years. And it was a great weekend. And we were sitting there, we had a few drinks, and he was playing me some wonderful music. And I just saw a photograph on the mantelpiece of a good-looking young man. And I said, Phil, who's your name then? And he just said, "That's the love of my life." And that's all he says.
Yeah.
For Phil to actually admit that's so anything was a good day. And for me, I can't tell you how happy that made me. Because we all need love. And we all need love. We all need that person that we can give ourselves to unconditionally. You know what I mean? So it is. And it's fantastic.
Pete, and he died very young.
Yeah. But the partner of love his life had passed away at that stage. So, but still, it filled his life. It was amazing.
Yeah. You're going to put on some music, are you? As well.
Yeah, I've put a few things. I'll give you a choice, right? You can listen to, I'll just play a bit. There's a bit of a demo that Philip did, and he sent it to us. Here's an idea for a song I've got. That's from about 1976. A song called Sadist the Lights. This is a jam session. There's a great version of Kitty Ricketts, actually. Would you like to hear a version of Kitty Ricketts we recorded for the BBC? Yeah.
paradise. No, you never walk the streets of paradise. How that you can fall in love too much.
Fantastic. 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 Thank you very much to the panelists. We'd also thank you to everyone who came, and to the organisers, to Joe, Mary and Alice, and all the staff here. It couldn't have been a better event. I had an amazing time.